Okay, so I was just talking to somebody about journaling, like I always do, and we're trying to identify like when a negative inner critic comes up or a part of you that comes up and has feedback about things that you are doing. So I wanted to make this video to kind of have like a template for you to follow as far as exploring those inner critics or those parts of you that come up whenever you have some kind of situation that happens that brings up negative thinking or just uncomfortable thinking or critical thinking. And so this is old technique that I've used. It is a cognitive behavioral therapy technique, which it doesn't really work for trauma, but it could. And so if you're dealing with something that is traumatic to you, then I would suggest that you do this exercise, or you ask your therapist about doing this exercise, and maybe do it in session if it feels too activating for you to do right now, because this video is not therapy. So this is just a tool, okay? So there are several steps to this, and we are going to do it like we're journaling it. So the first step is to think about the situation or trigger. And so for these purposes, if you're not with your therapist, or you want to not dig into something heavy, but just get the feel of what it is like to do this, let's just talk about like setting a boundary with somebody. So number one, this situation is setting a boundary with somebody that you think they might not like. So we're briefly going to describe that. So I'm about to make a boundary with somebody that they might not like. And say this person is a family member. Family boundaries are always really, really tricky. So you write down, I am setting a boundary with someone who might not like it. Okay. Then step two is, what are my feelings about setting this boundary? So my feelings may be something like, I feel nervous. And here's where, if you want to feel it a little bit instead of just having it be a thinking exercise, you can do something like, I notice in my body that when I think about setting this boundary with somebody, I feel nervous. I feel scared. Or I feel nauseous. Or I feel lightheaded. Something like that. So that just requires you just checking in with your body. And again, if that is too activating for you, back that off and just make it a thought exercise until you can get with your therapist. So then you want to go to step number 3, which is the unhelpful thoughts and images about the situation. So you want to identify what the negative thinking is behind it. So, like, for instance, my family member is not going to like this, and it's going to make me feel like I'm a bad person for putting up that boundary. So you write that down. I'm a bad person because I am putting up this boundary, and my family member is not going to like this. Okay, so then what you do with that is, you just notice, you can notice again, like what your body's feeling. And then you go to step number 4, which is facts that support the thought that you are a bad person for setting up this boundary. this is facts, remember? So, like, this is not an opinion. This is a fact about why you are a bad person for that. So, opinions might come up here. Like, um, I, am making this person really uncomfortable or upset. So, therefore, that might make me a bad person. I think a lot of people struggle in this column because a lot of situations are not factually can't factually back up your negative thought, right? Now there are some things that we come across like irrational beliefs that we label irrational beliefs that aren't actually rational beliefs, but that's a whole other video. This is that we just want to put facts down. um so on the example, like I said, you could say something like, my family member is really upset when people say that they're not going to come for Christmas because it is uncomfortable for them, right? So you could write that down if you want. That's an opinion. I kind of get stuck on that one because that's an opinion, but this exercise is helping you think through it, right? So then step number 5 is facts that don't support the thought. So, like, these are things that are going against your thought of you are a bad person. So, facts that don't support the thought. And here you could say something like, my therapist says it's okay to set healthy boundaries. Okay. You could say that. You could say, I notice that I always feel better when I set healthy boundaries. And feel free to pause me while you're writing down your stuff all through this video. So those are 2 facts that can support your belief or against the belief that you're a bad person for setting boundaries. So then step number 6 is give an alternative / more balanced thought. So now that you've considered the facts supporting your negative thoughts and the facts not supporting your negative thought, then you can give alternative or a more balanced thought, like, while I'm nervous about setting this boundary, I think it's going to be the best thing for me based on the fact that I couldn't find facts to support my negative thought of I'm a bad person for setting healthy boundaries. And instead, I came up with a couple of facts that said that I need to set these healthy boundaries. And one thing that I skipped over here that I think would be good is for you to look at the facts that you came up with. So, like, my therapist says it's okay to set healthy boundaries. If you've in fact had that situation, which hopefully, if you're in therapy, you have had your therapist say it's okay to set healthy boundaries, like, you can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do, and your feelings are very important and matter. And if you heard your therapist say that and you felt like a sense of relief when they said that, then I want you to just notice that too, like the feeling of relief when you set a healthy boundary. And when you notice that, you can just sit with that and think about how good that feels. And so you can say that to yourself, like, again, in this step number 6 about giving an alternative balanced thought, you can say, I had that complete sigh of relief when I remembered my therapist saying that it was okay for me to set a healthy boundary. So you can write that down. You can also think about other times when you've set a boundary, a healthy boundary with somebody, and they responded really well to that. And you can use that as something that bolsters you when you're trying to make this decision about setting healthy boundaries. Now, no guarantee that your family member that you're worried about is going to respond the same way, but it is another instance of fact and, giving an alternative, more balanced thought that you can also notice what feels like in your body. So, say you said to another family member, I just really don't have the energy to be at this family event for, hours and hours and hours, but I can commit to being there for 2 hours. Um, and then that family member was like, sure, no problem. I completely understand. And that made you feel like such relief that you could say, I need this boundary. And the family member says, I understand. So then you write those things down. And then you think about number 7, the outcome. And you want to think about how you felt when you first started thinking about it, and then at the end. And you might check in with body feelings after um, you're thinking about the situation that made you feel really upset. So you want to notice, like, oh, I was feeling really like nauseous and lightheaded. And now, when I think about the fact that I couldn't think of any facts that support I'm a bad person for making healthy boundaries, other than like the person has been upset with people making boundaries in their life before. Um, but I did feel good when I thought about all those like situations where I've set a boundary, where my therapist said it was okay to set a healthy boundary. Um, you can go over those things and then just notice, like, how does my lightheadedness feel now? How does my nauseousness feel now? And if it's still there, it might be a good idea to take some deep breaths, first of all, to kind of ground yourself. Or just continue to be curious about your feelings around this. And maybe you could do it again. And you could do it again and you could say, the situation is when I first started doing this exercise, felt nauseous and kind of lightheaded. And then you go down to, what are my feelings now? And you could say, well, I feel a little less nauseous. And you could say something like, when I gave myself permission to take a deep breath, it helped. And you go to number 3 and you could say, unhelpful thoughts or images on this. You could say, well, I feel kind of bad for even doing this exercise, right? And then you could think of like facts. I mean, this could go on and on. Facts that support your feelings about feeling bad about doing the exercise. Can you come up with something? I have a hard time with the step number 4, to be honest, because there really a lot of times are not facts to support feeling bad about something. But if you want to try to come up with something, all my life I've been told that it is not okay to set healthy boundaries. So that keeps popping up in my head, right? So then you go back to the facts that don't support your thought of like, I feel kind of bad for doing this exercise, right? And you can say, yet again, I will go back to, my therapist says it's okay to have healthy boundaries. And, my therapist says that this is a common thing that people struggle with, is feeling self-doubt about setting healthy boundaries for themselves. And then maybe you can just take a moment to check in with yourself and do something self-care. Like, again, taking a deep breath, maybe thinking more on conversations about with your therapist or a friend or a family member, And then you check back in with yourself and say, like, okay, how do I feel now? And maybe you don't feel 100% better, but you feel better than when you started and you got more curious about it. And since you have it written down in your journal, you can go back and look at it and you can keep like going over it. You can accept that you're not going to 100% feel really great setting a healthy boundary with this family member until you do it. And maybe you feel bad after that and you come back and you journal about that. So we can't really process our feelings if we just keep them stuck down. And having them in a journal is an excellent way to get them out so we can look at them and face them. So I hope that helped. Let me know if you have any questions.